A 30-year-old female, was recently contacted by my father who hasn't spoken to me for the past 10 years. 12 years back, my mom passed away after a really long and hard battle with brain cancer. It was a very difficult period of time for our family. But barely 6 months after she passed away, I started noticing that my father would be gone for prolonged periods of time and wouldn't even tell me properly exactly where he was going. He would tell me that he was just going out with friends who were not even in the city. At that point in time, I started getting suspicious. One day, I followed him to see where he was going and realized that he was paying frequent visits to my single aunt's house. My aunt was 3 years younger than my mother and had two kids, a son and a daughter who was slightly older than me. She had them with her previous husband, but had gotten divorced just after a year of marriage. He had left her with those kids since he did not want custody, and she was raising them with the child support and alimony that she got from her previous marriage. So, she was pretty well off, and money was not a problem for her, as her ex-husband was rich. My mother and my aunt were pretty close, and my aunt had been there for my mom all along, right until her last breath. So, it was quite shocking for me to see that my dad was visiting her. After following him for a couple more days, I finally gathered up the courage to actually ring the bell at her house and see what was going on in there. The day that I did that, my aunt opened the door, and once I was in there, I confronted them and asked them what was going on since my father had been lying to me about where he was. I couldn't understand why he was visiting my aunt so frequently. So, the two of them finally told me that they were in a relationship and had been for the last couple of years since my mother's diagnosis. They did not want to hurt my mom since she had limited time and did not want to stress her out even more by revealing their relationship. But now that she was gone, they could finally be together, and my dad even expected me to understand that it was not easy for him to deal with my mother's condition after so many years of being together. He was in denial and was already grieving when my mother had been diagnosed, which is when he had found solace in talking to my aunt. That had gradually developed into this sort of a relationship. I was pissed, obviously, and I left that day with no intention of ever interacting with my aunt again. They tried to stop me and talk to me, but I just left after telling them that they disgusted me, that both of them were terrible people who had betrayed my mother in the worst possible way. I'm not proud of it, but I cursed at both of them really badly, and then I finally went back home. That day, when my dad came back home later that evening, he told me that my behavior at my aunt's house was just unacceptable, and he was also not cool with the fact that I had been stalking him and following him around for the past couple of days. So, he expected me to apologize. But I told him that I was not going to do any of that, and that he could continue playing happy family with my aunt since I was moving out and going back to college since I did not want anything to do with him anymore. I had taken a bit of a break from college so that I could just be with my father in this trying time, but then when I realized that he had already found somebody, I was so disgusted I didn't even want to go back. After I went back to college, my dad sent me an email and said that he was selling the house that I had grown up in and was moving in with my aunt. Not only that, but he had hoped that I would be able to accept the fact that he was finally trying to move on with his life and be happy. But since I hadn't, and I had not even bothered to reach out to him or my aunt and apologize for my behavior, he believed that we shouldn't interact for some time. He said that my aunt and my cousins did not want me to visit them. I was basically banned from their house because of my behavior, and he agreed with them. So he did not defend me either. And it was very unlikely that we would be seeing each other anytime soon. That email broke my heart, but it is what it is, and I didn't bother to even reply to him. My parents and my grandparents had a college fund set aside for me, which I got access to as soon as I turned 18, so I did not have to worry about my expenses after that. And once I graduated, I started working immediately because I did not want to rely on my grandparents for money anymore. I was just 20 years old back then, and I had believed that eventually maybe my father would come back to his senses and leave my aunt, and then we would be able to sort things out between us. But that never happened. In fact, when they went public with their relationship, everybody in my mother's family cut my dad and my aunt off because it was just so disturbing. Even my grandparents did not speak to their daughter anymore, just because of how messed up what they were doing was. So for the past 10 years, I have had absolutely no contact with either of them, and I did not know what they were up to. I had heard in the middle that maybe they had moved away from here, but I was too busy at the time, so I never followed up on it. And even though I missed my father, I never tried to get in touch with him. Then, about a week ago, I received a call from my father after 10 years of not having any contact. At first, I didn't have that number saved, so I let it ring. But the second time that he called me, I answered the call, and as soon as I heard his voice on the other end, I was numb, and I didn't even know what to do. Anyway, after I responded, he told me that it was very important for me to talk to him because he needed my help and he had nobody else he could count on at the moment. So, I was the only person who could drag him out of this mess. Apparently, he was in a retirement home and had been there for the past 3 months. All this was happening to him because of my aunt and her kids who had officially taken things way too far. He told me that after they went public with their relationship, everybody cut him off, and they relocated to the suburb so they could be away from the city and everybody else, since it had become very obvious to them that nobody wanted to keep in touch with them after what they had done, and understandably so. Things had been great for a while. Her children were grown up anyway, so they were living on their own and would only visit once or twice a month. But every time that they would visit, they would take a bunch of money from him and my aunt to fund their lifestyle. After a couple of years, he told my aunt that he could not support this kind of behavior anymore and that they needed to put an end to it. And that's when the problem started because my aunt believed that as parents, they should be supporting their children no matter what, and age should not factor in. So, after a lot of fights, they decided that my dad would not give them any money, but my aunt would continue to support them financially. That went on for a couple more years, but then a few months ago, her kids came to her and demanded an exorbitant amount of money because they were planning on starting their own business. But they did not want to invest their own money in it, so they were asking my aunt and my father to invest. My aunt tried really hard to get him to invest in their business, but he had put his foot down and had said that he was not going to do anything until he was sure that they would be able to, since neither of them had any practical knowledge and they didn't even have a proper business model to go ahead with. So, they had been fighting about that recently, and eventually, my aunt decided that she was not willing to live with him anymore. They had never married, so they did not have a formal agreement, and the house that they were living in actually belonged to her. So, she decided to kick him out, and for the last couple of months, he had been living in a retirement home. The only reason he had even been put up in a retirement home was because my cousins wanted money from him and for the investment, and they were treating him nicely for now. But a couple of weeks ago, they had visited him and had told him that he only had 1 month to make up his mind whether or not he would be willing to help them with the money. And if he said no, they were going to stop paying for his stay at the retirement home as well, and he would have to find somewhere to live for himself. The problem was that everybody believed that he had a lot of money, and he was kind of comfortable. But unfortunately, my father's company had not been doing well in the past few years after the pandemic. So, he was not as rich as everybody had assumed him to be. So, there was no way that he could come up with the kind of money that they were asking of him, even if he'd wanted to. So, now he had been put in a very difficult position where he was losing out on both sides, and he had no idea what to do or how to go ahead because either way, he was screwed. And he was calling me for help because he believed that I was doing well in life, and maybe I could buy him something, or at least let him live with me for the next couple of months until he was able to figure out a way to get out of this mess. Because even if he said that he was not going to invest in their business, he was sure that my cousins would ask him to pay them back the amount that they had put in for his stay at home. It was just a whole mess, and even hearing it made me sick because I could not believe that people could stoop down to such levels and be so disgusting. I told my father that I needed some time to think about it, but honestly, I don't think that I will be able to help him out here because, yes, I am doing well for myself, but we have not been in touch for the past 10 years. I don't want to go out of my way to help somebody who never bothered to look out for me when it was his turn. So, despite telling him that I would think about it on the phone, after a couple of days, I blocked his number so that he would not be able to reach out to me again. I'm already swamped at work, so I don't need to worry about this as well. Besides, I have a personal life of my own, and I need to save up for my future as well because I'm planning on getting married to my boyfriend in a couple of years. We've been together since college, and next year, we plan on getting married since we have been talking about this for almost 1 year now. And he and I are living separately right now because of his work, but soon enough, he will be back, and we will be living together. Then, I don't think I'll be able to support my father either financially or by letting him live with me. So, I don't see the point in helping him out right now, only to kick him out eventually. Instead of putting him through all of that, I'm just choosing not to help him at all. He can just come clean to everybody and let them know that he does not have the kind of money that they have assumed he does because his company has not been doing well. And after that, he can use whatever money he has to rent an apartment and live there. I think it's a fair enough solution. But then, I guess after I blocked him, he decided to reach out to my grandparents. Now, I don't know if it's because of their advanced age or something, but my grandparents suddenly think that I should sort things out with my father before I get married because he's trying to reach out to me and fix things with me. And they believe that I should give him a second chance now by letting him live with me at the very least before he sets out on the search to find an apartment that will suit him. I find the switch up in their behavior very weird. Because for the longest time, they have hated both my father and my aunt and have always told me that I should never forgive them because what they did was just not acceptable. But now, all of a sudden, they think that I should make amends with my father and bury the hatchet, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. When I tried to argue with them about this, they made me feel like the bad guy and said that I was being heartless and whatnot. So, I'm just really confused about what to do because if my decision had my grandparents' stamp of approval on it, I would not be worried about whether I was doing the right thing or not. But here, I'm not so sure anymore. I have spoken to my boyfriend as well, and he isn't too sure about it either, so I have no idea what to do. And since this is too personal to be sharing with my friends, I'm here on Reddit to ask if I'm making the right decision or not. So, AITA for not wanting to help my father out after 10 years of no contact? Update 1. After reading the comments, I decided to go ahead with my decision and I told my grandparents that I did not want to be helping out my father, and my decision was final. After all, I was an adult now, and I don't think I owe it to anybody to help them in their time of trouble because, ultimately, my father had never looked out for me even when I was younger. We were not particularly close. A lot of you had been asking about my relationship with my father during my childhood, and like I said, we were not close, and he was mostly working during the day. Even when he would come back, he never tried to bond with me like a daughter. I thought that my mother's diagnosis would bring our family closer because he had started taking a lot of time off from work to be at home since his wife was dying. But unfortunately, his relationship with me still did not change. Instead, he thought that it would be more appropriate to spend that time creating a bond with his sister-in-law, so that was his choice. Now, I don't think I owe anything to a man who did that to my deceased mother when she was fighting to survive. It makes me think that even if she had somehow survived and still been alive today, would my father have chosen her or my aunt? Because from what he had told me, their relationship had started ever since my mother had told us all about her diagnosis. Anyway, that's all irrelevant now because nothing really worked out for him. The only people who are on his side right now are my grandparents, and I really find it very confusing. But I've told my grandparents that I'm not going to be helping him out, and if they want to be mad about it, they are free to do so. It's not going to affect my decision. I have a life ahead of me. I cannot take on my father as a burden, and my choice of words might upset some people. But right now, he is a burden to me. I've also discussed everything with my boyfriend. He thinks that I'm doing the right thing, so nothing else really matters because I know that he's never going to sugarcoat stuff for me and tell me that I'm doing the right thing if he doesn't agree with it. So, my conscience is clear, and I don't feel bad about anything. Update 2. Hi. So last week I texted my grandparents and told them that I did not want to help my dad out, and that was my final decision. So, they could not manipulate or guilt trip me into changing my mind. For a few days, they did not try to talk to me and just left my message on read. But then today, they decided that they were going to pay me a visit and try to change my mind in person. I don't know why they thought that it would work because I think I had made it pretty clear in my message that I did not want them to stress me out right now since I'm really busy at work. Anyway, they showed up at my house as I had returned from work, and I was pretty exhausted. So, I was in no mood to entertain any of their nonsense, and I got that right out of the way itself as soon as they rang the bell. I told them I was very tired. I did not want to discuss anything right now because it would be too emotionally heavy, and I was just not ready for it. But they still came inside and started talking about how upset my father was that I was treating him like this, and that they really believe that I should have some more compassion and be a little more humane towards him. I was very irritated, so I decided to just let them speak, and then eventually they would be able to get the hint and just leave because I did not want to engage in the conversation and end up fighting with them since that would only prolong everything. So, I decided to keep my mouth shut for a while, But they did not show any signs of stopping and just went on talking and talking about how hurt my father was and how he was suffering in that retirement home. Then the worst happened. A couple of days ago, my cousins had threatened him and said that they were going to have to kick him out of the retirement home and stop paying for his stay there if he did not cough up the money that they wanted for the business. He told them that he did not have that kind of money anymore. He also had to save for the future, and his company was not doing too well. So, my cousins told him that they were going to have to kick him out, and he would also have to pay them back for the time that he had spent there already since he had just wasted their time. Now, my dad did not have anywhere else to go and was literally pleading with my grandparents to convince me to let him stay with me here in my house until he was able to find a place of his own. But even that would take some time because he would also have to look out after his company and take up large chunks of his time during the day and in the evening. He was too tired to go out scouting for apartments, so my grandparents kept drilling it into my head that I was literally his only hope and I absolutely had to help him. I was getting pretty annoyed, and after some time when I realized that they were not going to shut up, I decided to turn the tables and ask them if they felt so strongly about this situation. Why were they not helping my dad out themselves? They had an extra guest room in their house as well, from what I knew, and they could very well afford to keep him out. So, there was no reason for them to be pawning him off onto me instead of doing it themselves since they had made it clear to me that they were feeling bad for him. Besides, I really did not feel bad for my father as much as they did. The problem that they were telling me about almost felt like an excuse for not trying to get his life in order himself. That's not how things work with me. If he can afford an apartment of his own, he should just get out of that retirement home and find one for himself. There's no need for him to be acting like a victim of something terrible when he has the means to do something and get his life back on track. Even if his company's not doing well, he can still turn things around. But instead, he's just choosing to give up and act like the victim in this situation. I don't have any sympathy for people who don't have any fighting spirit, and that's what it looks like is happening with my father right now. So, I don't want to get involved there at all. Anyway, when I asked my grandparents why they were not helping him out, they started coming up with excuses about how it would be weird for them since he had done something so wrong to their deceased daughter by cheating on her. It would be very draining for them, and I was surprised that they thought that these were perfect excuses for them, but it did not apply to me. Since him cheating on my mother, my aunt had really broken my heart as well, so I could say literally the same thing and get out of it like they were trying to do. When I brought these things up with them, we got into a very bad fight. They accused me of being heartless and having no compassion once again, and I was so exhausted. I just didn't even bother to argue with them. I told them that I did not want to speak to them about this anymore, and then they left. So, I don't know if I'm going to be talking to them because the way that they're behaving is very unreasonable, and I can't even understand why they're acting like this. But it's fine. I guess I have made my decision very clear to them, and now hopefully, they are not going to try and force me to change my mind again. Update 3. So, a couple of months have passed since I last spoke to my father, and 2 months back, even my grandparents stopped speaking to me. I was kind of unhappy about the way that things were turning out to be, feeling very lonely since even my boyfriend was not with me and would only get to visit me once or twice every couple of weeks. But a few days back, he moved back here because he was done with his project, and now we are officially engaged and are finally going to start preparing for the wedding because it's going to happen by the beginning of next year, and we just have 7 or 8 months to go. We announced it on social media yesterday, and I posted a picture of myself with the ring on my finger and a few photos of me hugging him. My grandparents are not active on social media, but I'm sure that people may have told them about the engagement, and since there was a party as well, they must have gotten to know about it. But they still did not even congratulate me. He had thrown an engagement party as well, and it took place last night itself. He had taken me out for a drive in the evening, and I kind of guessed that he was going to propose, but I did not exactly know what to anticipate. Anyway, so we went to a pretty romantic spot that meant something to us, and that's where he proposed. On our way back home, he told me that he had also organized a party in our honor and had invited all our friends and family, at least the people who were on good terms with us. So, after I got back home, I changed into clothes, and then we went to the restaurant and spent the rest of the night with our loved ones. Obviously, my grandparents had been invited to this event. My fiancé had told me that in spite of our differences, they had always been there for us every step of the way during the past 10 years, and he wanted them to be present. My grandparents rejected the invitation, and he did not want to break my heart yesterday, so we did not talk about it. But this morning, when I talked about it and expressed my disappointment with the fact that neither had my grandparents been present at my engagement party, nor had they congratulated me after that, he told me the truth. I had assumed that he hadn't even invited them in the first place, given how things were going with us. But to know that they had been invited and they had decided not to attend was just so humiliating. I can't even understand why they are suddenly so passionate about helping my father out. It does not make any sense. But I guess that seems like it's worth it to cut me off, and then I can't say anything to them. To each their own, so whatever. Update 4. Hey everyone. So I'm getting married in a month, and the invitations have been sent out. My grandparents did not receive one because a couple of weeks ago, I finally figured out why they were so keen on me helping my father out. So, my dad and I had not been in touch ever since that last phone call that he had made to me, and I had decided I did not want to help him. So, I blocked him instead. Anyway, he did not speak to me until a couple of weeks back when he finally reached out to me and wrote me an email explaining everything. So, my grandparents had known about my aunt's affair with my father all along, right from the beginning. As soon as they had started seeing each other romantically, she had come clean to them and had said that she even wanted to tell my mother about it. But they were the ones who had advised them to keep it under wraps because my mother was already suffering from cancer and she did not have much time left. So, it was better to not get into it and tell her the truth because that would only hurt her for however long she was here for. After that, everything had been an act, and they had kept in touch with my aunt and my dad throughout the past 10 years, but kept making it seem like they hated him and my aunt because they did not want to alienate me. It broke my trust in such a way that I don't think I can ever get over it, and I'm glad that none of them are in my life anymore. They deserve each other. My father had basically blackmailed my grandparents into trying to get them to convince me to help him out, but when they failed, he decided that there was no point in keeping their secret anymore and that I should know the truth, which is why he had sent me that email and had even attached proof of everything that he was telling me to be true. I'm quite shaken up because of that because it's not easy to learn that everything you had believed for the past decade was all a bunch of lies. But I'm trying to deal with it and cope. It helps that I have the wedding to look forward to because it's keeping me distracted. Then, my fiancé and I are going to go on our honeymoon. Hopefully, that will take my mind off of these things. But eventually, I hope to be able to move on for good. I'm just lucky that I have such a great partner beside me to help me deal with all of this. I'm totally grateful for that.